First of all, I want to apologize. I want to apologize for my Shakespearean English, okay? Because I don't want any smoothage moments, and I don't want to talk about my grandmother, so I'm going to stick with my papers. And if I forget any words in English, I will ask the audience for help. So be well with me, be gentle with me. It's my first time on a stage, you know, interview in English. So my first time. Hi, Dave.
מה נשמע?
מה נשמע? What's up?
מה קורה? אוקיי.
מצוין. Okay, I know it's a cliche, but I have to start with something. You don't look like the main character of a conservative guy. You are Jewish, you are gay, you're from a big city. You belong, in a superficial look, you belong to the left or to the progressive movement. But something happened. You know, for example, the late Roger Scruton, the conservative thinker, the British conservative thinker, was enlightened by the student revolution in France, 68. He saw the students in Paris, and he said to himself, I can't handle it. I'll move to the right. What was your point of changing? Because I know that you started in the left.
Well, first off, it is true that I'm Jewish. That's number one. It is true that I'm gay, although only after 10 p.m., so I don't know what time it is right now.
It's okay. We all
I didn't know if I was going to get a laugh on that one. Look, I am definitely not someone that if you would have, well, first off, if you would have said to me 10 years ago, you're going to be speaking at all these conservative conferences, which really are the only places that I get invited. I get invited by conservatives and also libertarians, and libertarians generally want the government out of your life, so that one seems very obvious to me why I would be invited. Conservatives, it's a little bit different. But I would say this, it's sort of connected to what I mentioned in my remarks. You know, conservatives, I think, are trying, the best I see it, and Jerusalem's a good example of this, to go, man, look at the past. Look at the past. There's been bloodshed. There's been fighting. From a Jewish perspective, our people have moved all over the world and been kicked out of things and built things and kicked out again and all of this stuff. But something was there that was keeping us going. And it's very obvious to me that the only reason that you're all still here, living literally here, is because there is some truth in there somewhere. There are many civilizations that are long gone. So on that front, I don't consider it that surprising that I would be considered conservative in a way, in that I believe in truth, I believe in history, I believe it's important to understand your history and all of those things. I would say connected to that, to answer the other part, and what's funny, actually, I've only lived in New York and Los Angeles. I've only lived in New York and California. Now I live in the free state of Florida, which is what I call the,
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about
We'll
this.
get there. It's the other promised land. You guys have the promised land. Florida's the other promised land. I think what's happened is that I believe in individual rights. I believe you have a right over your body and over your mind, and as an adult can make whatever decisions that you want to make, and sometimes you're going to make decisions that some people will like and sometimes other people won't like. But what the government is supposed to do is to protect the ability for the individual, as Ayn Rand called. The individual is the smallest minority. And a good, true, effective government would be doing everything possible to encourage human flourishing. Otherwise, we can just have governments that tell us how to live. And that's not really what I'm interested in. And that's what I think puts me on a stage like an event like this.
Because I read about you. You want something happened along the way, maybe 20 years ago, 50 years ago, that you know was the breaking point where you understand that all this mumbo jumbo, it's beautiful mumbo jumbo of the left and the progressive movement and the liberal Democrats is you thought that it's you thought you're gonna move to the other side. I just look for the
so I'll give you
exact point, because you know, maybe over there we can find the right answers.
So I'll give you, so there are several examples along the way, and for any of you, I have no doubt, if we polled everyone in here, some people here were former leftists, and there might be...
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I was also former
leftist.
leftist.
You know, usually when you're a former leftist, you end up, I think, going all the way down the road because you know what that thing is. So there are several moments that were really significant in my career. One of them that probably most of you have seen, it's been seen hundreds of millions of times, is I was interviewing Larry Elder, who's a conservative radio host, a huge supporter of Israel, by the way, and I was still a lefty, and we were talking about racism and systemic racism and policing and all of the issues of the day, and he really just sort of beat me senseless with facts. People have seen it, and the videos on YouTube, they said, you know, black conservative destroys white libtard, and I was the white libtard, so that's not fun. That was one of the moments, because I listened to him. That's really what it came down to. I listened to him. I thought, wow, this guy's saying some things I haven't heard before. I better start listening. And then subsequently, what I did, after that little sort of, you know, it was just like a little pin coming out. Then I thought, all right, well, let me talk to this Ben Shapiro guy. And I talked to Ben Shapiro. And let me talk to this Glenn Beck guy and Dennis Prager and all of these other people. And what I found was consistently, although I had political disagreements with them, which I would say have lessened over the years, although they still remain to some degree, and I'm happy to discuss that if you want, what I found was these were nice people who were pleasant, who knew what they thought and why they thought it. That was the most impressive part to me. Not only were they were just sort of nicer than anyone, you know, conservatives are supposed to be cold and mean and they only care about money and war or something like that if you listen to the mainstream media. And it's like, it's just not, that was the easy part to get over. The part that I think that really enlightened me was that these people really wanted to talk about why they thought things. And we really don't have that on the left in America anymore. I actually think you have a better version of it in Israel.
No.
Maybe not.
it's
Maybe
the
not.
same.
It might be.
Yeah, once it was a long delay between the United States and Israel, but now with globalism...
Listen, the internet's making things shorter. Yeah, and I've only been here for 7 days, so I could be wrong. But generally, I found a group of people who really wanted to understand why did they think things, where do rights come from, why is history important, and that's what I've found on the right. And although I may be, again, as you said, by a certain definition, an outlier on that, I generally have not found that to be a problem.
And that's why we
truly.
like the Rovin report, because of that. Because you talk about ideas, you talk about facts, you don't talk about, you know, feelings. That's Ben Shapiro. But with Ben Shapiro, I couldn't speak because I wouldn't understand him. He talks so fast. It's not for me. I'm an old guy.
I'm basically slow motion Ben Shapiro.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Yeah,
the bigger version.
Yeah.
So you come from a country divided, you know, between left and right, to a country who's divided by left and right. It's not your first time in Israel. You have extensive connection here. So, 2 questions. What are your insights from this visit, if you can share with us? Different insight than what you're talking about the political crisis of dividedness. And what is similar and what is different between the clash in the US and in Israel? Also, from very superficial insight of you, these 7 days that you've been here.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because for as big as this judicial reform situation is for you guys, from an American perspective, this is barely being talked about. I mean, there was one day about a month ago when they had the really big protest in Tel Aviv that it made it to CNN. But beyond that, and believe me, CNN will go out of their way to make Israel look bad. They will do anything they can. The New York Times, they're always looking for anything to get Israel on. It really hasn't been focused on too much. So one of my other reasons of coming here at this time was I thought, all right, well, let me figure out what this really is about. And maybe since, as you said, the woke stuff sort of starts in America and moves its way here, maybe I'd be able to offer you guys a little something that might give you some of the defenses on that. So I don't know that I fully have that answer yet. What was the second part of the question?
The question is what the similarity and the difference between the clash in America and the clash in Israel? Because
well, the difference,
the woke stuff, the woke movement is coming to Israel in fast forward.
You know. Well, I did an event in Tel Aviv 2 nights ago, and during the Q&A, someone said something that I think was really interesting. That's sort of a technical answer to it, but he said that he thought that a certain level of the woke stuff won't happen in Israel simply because your language is gendered. The way you speak is gendered. So it will make it doubly confusing to call a he a she, or a she a he, or the rest of it. Now it's sort of, a bunch of you are laughing, but it's like, wow, that's pretty good. That's a real defense that you have. It's a technical defense built into the language of Hebrew that might stop some of this. I think that's some of it. I think the other thing, and it's connected to what I was talking about earlier, is that as an unbelievably multicultural society, and the funny thing is Israel probably is second to America in that regard, because you guys also have taken in people from every corner of the earth, and in essence Jews wherever they were all over the planet. But the Jewish part keeps it somewhat protected. I think what the wokesters have done with us is they have used all of our tolerance and all of our goodness and all of our diversity. You know, it's interesting, I've heard the word diversity a lot since I've been here. And I don't like the word diversity anymore.
I also don't like, I know.
Diversity for the sake of diversity is not good. I like diversity of ideas. You know, if I'm sitting with 10 people and they all happen to be black, or they all happen to be white, or they all happen to be Jewish, or anything else, it's like, that gives me nothing until I hear them speak. So diversity in and of itself means nothing. So that is one word that I don't know that I had heard in Israel, but I heard it an awful lot. I was at a Jerusalem Post conference a few days ago, the talk that I did the other day. It's just something that seems to be out there now. And I think you guys have to sort of watch out for that, because they will start, diversity is good to some extent, but you know, there's a phrase in America, everyone always says, diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength, and it kind of sounds right. Oh, there's all sorts of people, and that is our strength. It's not really our strength. Our strength is our common values. It's the things that we believe that allow us, that allow you to build this country so that someone like me can come here after not being here for 7 years and be blown away. I am telling you, when I got out of the plane 5 days ago, and I had to go immediately to Jerusalem. So I get in the car and I'm driving and I'm looking, the roads, these are new roads. There used to be a lot of garbage on the side of the roads. I don't know if you guys remember that in Israel. It seems like it's gone. All the things that I mentioned earlier, the building and the light rail and all this stuff, it's like something was uniting you to build this project forward, and it wasn't diversity, and I think that's the point.
Yeah, but this is the problem, because we had 10 years of 10 years of prosperity, 10 years of goodness, and it's the same as what happened to the Western civilization. 20 years of silence, 20 years of prosperity, and now we're dealing with the Chinese. But I want to talk. I want to go to America, man. I want to go back to America. I want to talk about freedom of speech and cancel culture. There's no need to emphasize how committed you are to freedom of speech and the importance of individual freedom. See, I wrote it myself on my note. It's very important. You are a fierce critic of cancel culture and the left tendency to raise individuals for their opinions. And it seems that we live in the reality of 1984, that progress is winning, mutes and erases. But there are glimmers of hopes in the midst of despair. Elon Musk gives a fight. DeSantis, Florida, gives a fight. A few days ago, it was reported that Warner Brothers had signed contract with J.K. Rowling after the zombies tried to cancel her. So I ask you, is there any hope for the First Amendment? Is there any hope for the freedom of speech in America?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that probably like a lot of you, I consider myself a world-weary optimist. I'm not an optimist just because I think things will get better. They don't get better. And the history of the Jewish people, it's pretty brutal. And again, we're still here and now flourishing in this land, right? That's absolutely incredible. It's a modern miracle. But it comes with a lot of pain, right? It comes with a lot of work and dedication and loss and all of those things. So I say world-weary optimist because I consider myself a realist first. I would say first off, you know, the United States, we do have one thing that you don't, we have several things that you guys don't have, but one thing that's really important, I think, or at least for us, has been that we have a written constitution. So our First Amendment, it is locked in there. You cannot create laws that actually stop freedom of speech from a legal perspective. Now, cancel culture, which has basically been like a corporatized or algorithmically enhanced version of stifling on free speech, that's real for sure. But the government the government, in essence, has not been able to stop our free speech. Now, they've done all sorts of things, right? We know from Elon Musk and the Twitter files.
Yes, I want to ask you about it.
So we can hold that for a second. We know they're doing all sorts of things, but the truth is, in the United States today, with the exception of the very, very few things that you can't say, you can't directly incite violence, you can't, we have very strict libel and slander laws, you can basically say what you want. I would say the reason I'm an optimist, though, is, as many of you know, a year and a half ago, I moved to the free state of Florida. And Florida is doing it right. I welcome you guys all to come, and if you're trying to figure out, is there any part of the United States that's still working, that's still doing it right, Florida is free. Not only was it free, you guys really, Israel really, in my estimation, went overboard with some of the COVID stuff and mandates and all that sort of stuff.
It's funny, we can talk about the COVID because in Israel, the Israeli right went with the American left and become very confused.
Right, that's why some of these connection points can be a little inconsistent.
Because
for sure.
every conservative, I understand why you don't like the word conservative because it sounds so old. Sorry? What? Somebody asked. Okay. But I think conservatives are right now are the hip movement of the United States. You are more cool than the left wing. But yeah, surely, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, I don't know, even Joe Rogan, I know he's not right wing or not conservative, but he's more close to...
There are freedom fighters.
Yeah, you are a freedom fighter.
But briefly, let me just say in 10 seconds, Florida is giving the blueprint for how America can turn itself around. So I am deeply concerned about the United States of America, but we also have a federalist system where these 50 states can all basically manage their affairs. That's one huge advantage we have over Israel, right? Because you guys, as I said, you're the size of our second smallest state, New Jersey. We have an ability, if you don't like it in California where I was, and we had high taxes and draconian mandates and horrible homelessness and crime and all those things, you can get up and you don't have to leave the country. You can go somewhere else, and then you can go to Florida and say, okay, well, it's better here, and I like this, or I don't like it there, I'm gonna go to Montana, or I'm gonna go to Colorado. So we have an ability to constantly be moving in a way that allows what Dennis Prager always says, the great American experiment, to constantly be tinkering. We're all kind of scientists within that, and you can literally make your life an experiment to find a better place. Israel, just because of the size, whether
you can go to Syria or to Lebanon.
Right, you can go to Syria or Lebanon. I don't recommend it.
You are a vocal critic of identity politics. You talk about diversity, social justice activism. Sorry again for my accent. I wouldn't try to do another accent. It's better like this. I guess you agree, but I guess you agree with me that the consequences are huge. In San Francisco, I just saw it this week, offices stand empty, no demand. Chicago went through a pogrom, real pogrom in Chicago. They beat people, the shit out of people, sorry. California immigrates to Texas and Florida, as you say. You yourself left. Is there any possibility to go back and stop the zombie attack? So, and I ask you something, and it's interesting because the Democrats that come to Florida and Texas, don't you fear they're gonna vote for the Democrats and bring the Democrats back to Florida and Texas?
I'll answer that part first because I'm very appreciative to the Floridians that have been there for so long, and there used to be a joke in America about Florida Man. Florida Man was this crazy guy who was wrestling alligators and fighting with people on the street and doing all this crazy stuff. But Florida Man obviously knew something. Florida Man was the guy that kept a state free enough that became over 1 million people moved to Florida in the last 3 years. Over 1 million people. Think about the size of Israel. What is it, about 9 million people?
Yeah, we're 9 million. It's
9
huge.
million. So about 1 million people left California. They moved either to, in most cases, Texas, Florida, or Tennessee. About 400,000 people fled New York. So it's funny because at a lot of conservative conferences, everyone can get kind of lost in policy the entire time, and tax rates and security or whatever it might be. But I always tell people, if you're not that interested in politics, you don't really have to think about this too hard. Where are people moving and where are they leaving? That tells you what is right. Nobody is moving to California to be taxed high and regulated and all of those things. So I'm very bullish, I would say, excited for what's happening in those states. And to your question was, can sort of anything stop it in the blue states and the blue cities? I don't think so at the moment. I think they are in a free fall, and it's going to take it's going to take something almost catastrophic to reset that. You know, you may remember briefly when Rudy Giuliani took over New York City. New York City had been run by a far-left progressive named David Dinkins, destroyed the city, crime everywhere, tourism was gone, murders were up, everything. Rudy came in and cleaned it up just like that. He said, we're going to get these people off the street, we're going to stop the drugs. He had fought the mafia as a prosecutor before that, and he did it. The problem that all of these cities face right now, there's very few good people left because they left. And I'm not concerned that the new people coming to Florida are going to vote the wrong way, because I meet them every day. Because
they won't vote for the Democrats.
They know what you know. It's not like years before people would leave a city and they mostly left for tax reasons. That would be the main reason to leave. After 3 years of COVID and violence on our streets and all of that stuff, people know why they left. So everywhere I go, I meet new Floridians and they say, Dave, I'm going to vote for Republicans. Finally. You don't have, actually, that was slightly off. When I was in California, they would whisper it. In Florida, they're allowed to say it out loud. So,
you know, it's funny because I want to talk about Jews, and Jews are the main, you know, in California and New York, this is the main places where Jews lived. I remember 30 years ago, I was a mover in New York. I worked for Schleppers. When Jenkins was the mayor, and I paid $800 for one-bedroom apartment in Upper West Side. Now it's gonna cost you $8,000 maybe to have one. Maybe I'm. So I know. So I saw the differences in my own eyes when you can go on the subway and it becomes safer. Let's talk about the Jews in the midst of all this chaos of identity politics. Where are the Jews located? You know, not the Orthodox Jews whose identity is clear. You know, it's obvious. They are Jewish. They're practicing Jewish. The non-practicing Jews, where they're located in the identity pyramid. And why so many Jews are in the radical left of the Democratic Party? And how come the Jews are the main players in the woke movement? Sorry for the long question. I give you all the... And it seems that wherever you throw a stone and to find, you know, the most radical left, there are Jews.
All right.
It's like in some, you know, someone said when the Trotsky do the revolution, the Brunstens pay the price. So I'm a little bit afraid from the backlash that could happen to the Jews because of those guys.
Okay, so it's a lot to do here, so I'll try to do it somewhat briefly. Look, many Jews in America, and I would say post-Holocaust and so many people moving to America, assimilation became sort of the #1 thing. And then because of assimilation, Jews who, just like you guys here in Israel, Jews work hard, care about education, that's not disconnected to our people's history, all of those things. We became wildly successful, right? And then what comes along with that, as you're kind of shedding some of your traditions and things, is that you start looking for more and more oppression all over the place. And Jews are sensitive, I would say, to actual oppression because we are a people that has been oppressed. But in America, we beat oppression. We really did. There's no laws against anybody in America based on identity. You know what I mean? There's no laws against gay people. There's no laws against trans people, believe it or not. There's no laws against black people or Asian people or anything else. So Jews became unbelievably successful, but in some respects it was by trading in tradition for success, and I think there's legitimate reasons for that. I really do. So then Jews ended up in a lot of these positions that led to a lot of the wokeness. I'm definitely concerned about some of the backlash that you mentioned. I would say this, you know, it's funny, my friends in LA, you know, I have my sort of TV friends, I guess, but the guy who built my house, surprise, surprise, my house in LA was an Israeli because Israelis build, and his name was Amnon, and he was from Israel, and everybody that he worked with was Israeli. My plumber was Israeli, and my electrician was Israeli, and everyone was Israeli. My plumber, Avi, couldn't smell, which I thought was hilarious for a plumber. Only an Israeli plumber. David, I told him we had a plumbing problem. I was like, Avi, you got to smell this. It stinks. David, I can't smell. I don't know. I can't smell. So he brought in a guy named Jose, a Mexican guy. Jose, smell this. I was like, why don't you trust me? Why did you need to bring in a Mexican guy to smell this thing? Anyway, what I found was what I found was I had an incredible affinity to these people. They were mostly Sephardic, by the way. It was a lot of Moroccans, Iraqis. I had this incredible affinity to them because they still believed in something, and it was something that I wasn't seeing with so many of
Ashkenazi Jews.
But yeah, well, just I would say Americanized Jews in a certain sense, because I know talking about Sephardic and Ashkenazi here has a different connotation than maybe it would in America, so I don't want to go too far on that. But by the way, I would say that this is, without going too deep on this, I would say this is something Dennis Prager has been warning about for decades, for absolute decades, that it was all going to come at a cost. I would also say it's why I used to, for years, called myself a classical liberal. My first book was a defense of liberalism, and I think liberalism in its true form, classical liberalism based on limited government and individual rights, is the thing that freed Jews. Wherever liberalism was in societies, that was the thing that freed us. But I think it almost became drunk on itself, and a lot of Jews just happened to fall into that trap.
Yeah, but it's a bit too complicated because we had this history lesson that we had. You don't. In no scenario, in no nightmare, you can't see something terrible happen to the Jews, because I remember I saw a movie about the Jewish humor. When Jews play with all these Jewish comedians, American movie that they talk, all the guys, all the best. And there was one, he's not the best, Gilbert Gottfried. I know that Seinfeld hated.
You're talking about the Aristocrats, I think.
Yeah, no, not the Aristocrats, another movie. And he said that, and they talk about that all the Jews, all these Jewish guys, they used to hide their identity. They don't call it, and they don't like to say about themselves that this is a Jewish humor and so. And he said, but every Jewish know that one day they will hear a knock on the door. Are you Jewish? Get out. That's what he said. Is it in the back of the mind of every Jewish person, also in America? I know it's not one of my questions. I ask you, doesn't it sitting in somewhere in the brain?
I don't know that I can speak for the brain of every Jew, which would probably cause my own brain to explode. But I will tell you this, that when there was, it was in the May of 21, when there was some violence here. There was like this spillover violence in LA. You may remember we had people that were attacking Jews on the street, or people that were wearing yarmulkes, and it happened. There was bits of it all over the United States. And that was one of the moments where I thought I should leave California, because I thought the system is so broken. We've defunded the police. We've demonized all of the good things. Our institutions are breaking, that the system will not be able to fight for the right things. We don't have enough good people anymore. And this isn't about just Jews. There aren't enough good people that will fight for the actual minorities who are being attacked or anything else. I ended up staying in California for about 6 months, and a beautiful story to something I mentioned earlier about Larry Elder. I ended up campaigning with him. He ended up running for governor of California. He did not win, but the guy who woke me up when you asked me that question, 6 or 7 years after that, I was campaigning with him when he was running for governor. So there was a beautiful story there, and then that didn't work, and then I decided to move. But I do think that there is some issue with, in places like New York, where we've already defunded the police and demonized, and we punish people for doing the right thing. If you jump the turnstile, if you're going to the subway, it's not a crime anymore. They won't do anything. LA, you're allowed to trespass. All these crazy things that you're allowed to do. You're allowed to, literally in Los Angeles, you are allowed to steal, I think it's $980 worth of items at a store, and they will not prosecute you. These are crazy ideas, but what it does over time, it basically unties everything that ties the society together. And once you're living in a place like that, then no one's gonna save anyone, whether they're Jews or blacks or whites or anyone else. And I would strongly counter that with what's going on in Florida. Florida would be just fine.
I see what happened in Brooklyn. Yeah. I see to the religious Jews, to the Hasidic Jews. It's not a picnic.
Well, I think there's another reason for that also. When you see that, Jews are always at the top of the hate crime thing. It's just how it is, so nobody talks about it because it would be too boring, in essence, for the news to talk about. But the problem really there is that Jews don't fit into the intersectional calculator. The idea of the entire woke operation is that if you are a minority, you must be oppressed. It is as simple as that. Jews do not fit into that.
Yeah,
Jews,
they're white, and they're secular, and they don't look,
but successful. That's what it is.
Yeah,
that's what it is more than anything else.
Ben Shapiro said that Jews, some of the secular Jews, not practicing Jews, are carrying their Jewishness as an exotic, something exotic, but they are the same like the other whites of America. What's the difference today if you study, I don't know, in Yale or Princeton, and you're Jewish or you are WASP?
Well, actually, at Yale or Princeton or Harvard, they used to discriminate against Jews, and now they've moved that, and now they actually discriminate against Asian people. There were too many Asians who were working too hard and coming from good family values and cared about education and all of those things. So Harvard literally started discriminating against Asians the same way Harvard was once discriminating against Jews. And you might go, well, okay, they want diversity, and that sounds nice. They want the student body to look a certain way, except once you start privileging a certain set of people based on skin color or ethnicity, you're going to punish somebody else. So I don't think that a second-generation kid from South Korea whose parents moved here and maybe owned a little grocery store or something and worked really hard, I don't think he should be discriminated against just because you want to help a young black person. And this is one of the things that the left does really bad. They have very simple answers to very complex questions. Oh, we want affirmative action because we want to help black people. Okay, well, that means you're going to have to punish some other people. And then once you do that, think about it. Once you say to a kid, okay, you can get into a certain high school. You don't have to have the grades as everybody else, but you'll get in because of your skin color, because you're oppressed. Well, now you've let them in. And then beyond that, they can get into a better college because of it. And then they can get into a better grad school and med school. And then next thing you know, over time, you will have doctors who do not know how to operate. You will have pilots who do not know how to fly planes. And we can all think about that and go, that's completely crazy. But the death of meritocracy is what will destroy the West. I think that's another built-in defense that you guys have, by the way.
No,
Israelis love to build.
We have something like this in the medical system. It is also affirmative action for the Arab student that they came and they learned in Moldova in a university that they had one. I don't want to get.
I would say opportunity is the way to help people, not. But once you start lowering standards for everybody or a certain set of people, you've lowered standards across the board, and then you just have to think what that does.
I agree with you 100%. Now for something that it's not 10 o'clock, but I had to ask this question. On one hand, you fight against woke culture and the progress that has gotten out of control. And at the same time, you are an openly gay man fighting for equal rights for LGBT people. Where is the balance between equal rights for gay people, which we all agree with? I'm talking seriously, it's not cynical. And the sheer madness of gender affirmation treatments for minors, including irreversible treatments, help us to draw the line, because everything that it's now in Israel too. So this affirmation action, 3 years old. Just this week in the Israeli broadcast, the public Israeli podcast, the psychiatrists talk about the kid, a 3 years old kid that they just start with him with this affirmation treatments.
Well, I would say first off, this idea of connecting these letters, LGBTQ, whatever they've added to these things, makes no sense. The trans movement is, the trans movement is the most radical anti-gay movement in the world, actually. Because you really have to think about this and I'll address the gay thing in a second, but at the trans level, most of these people, if you want to, let's say you have a 5-year-old, this is so crazy, and I have a 7-month-old and a 5-month-old. So the idea, first off, that you could have, let's say, a 5-year-old, and you would say, okay, this kid is trans. This boy is actually a girl. First off, the kid's brain is not developed in a way that would be remotely possible. But what you probably are saying as a parent is you're looking at your 5-year-old son and going, boy, he's not playing with Transformers or G.I. Joe. He happens to like Barbie more, or whatever the Israeli equivalent of that is. Or he's a little more effeminate, something like that, right? And rather than having maybe, hopefully, I would say a child who grows up and hopefully is a functional gay man, or guess what? Sometimes there are effeminate guys that turn out to be straight, and there are straight acting guys that turn out to be gay. The gestalt of life is pretty wide, and all of us surprise people, and none of us are robots, right? At least not yet. And so what they're doing is they're basically saying, oh, you effeminate boy who maybe will turn out to be gay, but again, maybe not, you are actually a girl. Or they're saying to the girl who's the tomboy, the girl who likes softball or whatever it might be, she doesn't like the traditional girl things, they're saying you're a boy. It's ironic because these are also the people who, well, on one hand will tell you that gender is fluid and everyone can be everything and all of these things, but they really want to perform surgeries on children. So I think it would behoove the gay movement, which is obviously fairly big in Israel in terms of, you guys have the biggest parade in the Middle East, which maybe that doesn't say much, but I always tell people, I wrote in my last book that gays for Palestine is very different than Palestine for gays, right? But I think it would really behoove gay people to say, no, this has nothing to do with us. I know nothing, I have no more in common with a trans person than you do, the truth is, right? I am in the body I am supposed to be in, and we can talk about sexual attraction or whatever, but I'm also not denying biology, right? And I have sympathy for someone that might have gender dysphoria, and my personal belief, and maybe some of you disagree with this, and that's fine, is that as an adult, if you wish to live any way you want and put on any clothes you want and all of that, that has nothing to do with me. But once you start pushing it on children, you start pushing it into all of our institutions, then we have a problem. And I would end that by saying, and this is what, one of the things that really put this on the map was what happened in Florida with this quote, what you know as the Don't Say Gay bill, which the word gay was not in it, and it had nothing to do with that. They didn't want teachers at public schools privately discussing sex and sexuality with children, which we all know is true. I have no doubt I can say this with an Israeli crowd, as I often do with American crowds. Picture your third grade teacher, right? Now picture your third grade teacher telling you about her sex life. It's insane, right? It's completely insane. But this is what they pushed on us. And again, as a parent of, my oldest is 7 months, his name is Justin. Imagine if he's now 7 years old and I found out that the teacher has, for 3 months, without me knowing, been calling him Justine and referring to him as a her. This is psychotic, and all of us in Western societies have to decide who is your child, who, I don't want to say owns is not the right word, but who is in charge of your child's psychological makeup? Is it you or is it the state? And I think the answer is fairly obvious.
I think it's very ironic because, we talk about the Marxist virus, the capitalism, the socialism born with capitalism. And the first guy, a socialist, Marx, they fight for 10 years old that were miners in North England that died from suffocation from the coal mine. That was the main issue of the let's say the Communist Party or the socialist movement in the 19th century. And now the successors, in the way to ruin the Western civilization, they play with kids 3 years old and with their identity. And it's easier because the subject of the revolution, everybody could be the subject of revolution. Every snowflake came to say to, okay, now I'm gay. In the noon, I'm big. I'm not into nothing. And in the evening, I like to, I don't want to say the words because people over here, but I like to do it with flowers. It's insane. It's narcissistic. And the Chinese is sitting there and look at us.
It's not on their TikToks.
And they would do, you know what they're going to do? They're going to do foo. And the Western civilization will collapse, and we will have to learn Chinese, and you see how I'm struggling with English. I don't want the Chinese calling. It's funny. Too hard for me. I'm too old for this shit.
That's what the fight against the woke is really about. A lot of Israelis had to learn English. It would be a lot to learn Chinese.
It's easier English.
Yeah, let me just say one other thing about that in terms of the built-in defenses that Israelis have. I would also say that because Judaism is so connected to family, and that probably everyone in this room does Shabbat with family, and I grew up doing Shabbat with my family. I try to do Shabbat. My brother-in-law is sitting right there. He lives in Miami. We should do more Shabbats. We try to. That will also be a defense because it allows a sort of natural force field from all of the craziness if you actually every week, even if it's for one meal, have to sit with your family and deal with all the craziness of family. I actually think that is a
good.
true, crazy is good.
Look, we are 3,000 years old. We know something.
Crazy is better with some wine.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to our day job.
Yes.
Now I want to, we have 6 minutes there.
Okay.
So let's
I'll
talk
try
about,
to be briefer. Okay.
Yeah, it's, okay. You're one of the, I give you some, a little bit of praise, but because you deserve it. You're one of the pioneers of network broadcasting, one of the founding fathers of podcast and independent journalism in the net. You have been critical of the mainstream media for years. What do you think is the future of alternative media? Will the share of podcasts continue to bite into mainstream media? And I give you, let's try to use one example. Does Tucker Carlson breakup with Fox symbolize a trend that is gaining momentum?
Yes, look, mainstream media is a dying dinosaur. It basically is a dinosaur in the tar pit sinking. It knows it's sinking. There's nothing it can do. It's continuing to sink. The future, obviously, is all online and all digital, but they're not going to just give up. They're not just going to close up shop. And, there are still millions and millions of people that pay attention to them. But, CNN, if I say CNN at a college gig, they laugh. That's the joke. CNN. There's no punchline. It's just the joke. They don't buy into this anymore. They should not buy into this. And I'll tell you, the truth is that the future are things like I've created with Locals.com and Rumble. My brother-in-law, Asaf, who created Locals with me, all we were trying to do was build me a subscription service. I said to him, Asaf, I want to be on my own. Can we build this thing? And he said, okay, we can do it. No problem. I need 2 weeks, okay, 2 weeks. And he built it. And then it was successful, and he said, okay, I think we have a business here. And then we did have a business, and then we merged with Rumble, and we're building the rails for the alternative internet. We're building the rails that will be an alternative YouTube. We're building the rails that'll be an alternative to Amazon AWS, which is, sort of the underbelly of the internet. And we're just going to build and build and build and see what happens. And mainstream media, it will keep fighting. I mean, part of the reason they're so hysterical all the time and they lie about everything is because they know no one's watching anymore. So they're in the end. If it's sort of like if an animal is, in the corner and it's wounded, all it can do really, if you try to help it, is lash out. And that's really all they can do at this point. There is nothing on network television in America that makes any sense whatsoever. I would say the closest to it was Tucker Carlson and some of the people on Fox to some extent. Not all of them, but some of them. And I think whatever's going to happen with Tucker right now, look, I would love to have him on Rumble. We're going to do everything that we can to get him over there. We'll offer him everything. You could do whatever you want. We're going to give you whatever you want. We'll figure out where the money is, like all that stuff. I think he can help. I think he can help break the back of this thing because it needs to be broken. It's very funny. When I do my show every day, I would prefer not to play clips from CNN and The View and all of these ridiculous TV shows with these liars, these MSNBC, these people that lie over and over. But I have to do it because someone has to. No, it's fun. No, and it is fun.
It's fun.
It is fun to a degree.
They're so stupid. They're
sure.
so ignorant.
Sure, but wouldn't it, I'm pretty sure by a round of applause, wouldn't you all prefer to wake up tomorrow and everything be sane again and we could all just move on with our lives, right? And I think that's what we have to fight for. And I would gladly retire and disappear, and I'll move to Caesarea. I was just up there.
I hope people was like English.
Some of those houses, holy cow, that's where I'm going.
Podcast in Hebrew is, we have only 9.5 million people,
Yeah.
but also in Israel, it's going all over the world. The mainstream media is collapsing, and guys, the talents, I don't know, are going independent. But censorship is a fright. Following the release of the Twitter documents and the FBI attempt to control and censor information, do you see any more threats from the authorities to independent journalism and social media? Because we're getting to election year, and they would do everything in the power, to minimize the power of the right wing.
I always say to people, I'm not worried about the things that we know that they're doing. I'm always worried about the things that we don't know, right? And that's what I was saying 5 years ago. We didn't know exactly that they were shadow banning, meaning depressing certain viewpoints. We didn't, if you got suspended, then it was obvious. But I was way more interested in the things that we couldn't quite figure out. And then Elon releases the Twitter files, and I went to San Francisco, and I sat with Elon and some of the programmers, and he's showing me what's going on behind the hood. They basically show you the code. The whole thing was designed to silence people. The entire thing. The previous CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, testified under oath that Twitter did not shadow ban, which, you know, basically that means you send out a tweet and then just a certain amount of people don't see it. So it's not an obvious censorship that you can figure out exactly what they've done. They didn't delete it altogether, but people don't see it. He testified that they don't do that. The entire system was built to do that. So he lied under oath, but nothing will happen. I mean, that's just sort of how government works or doesn't work, as it were. So yes, they will do all sorts of things. Just think about it this way. When you watch, some of this is also just a function of reality and not nefarious to some extent. So if you watch a video on YouTube, let's say you're watching one of my videos, and then, you know, the suggested videos come up on the right. In a clean algorithm that was completely devoid of bias, you might see some more of my videos. They might go, oh, he likes Dave Rubin, so he probably likes Ben Shapiro. Here's a Ben Shapiro video. Here's a PragerU video. Or in a and then they might show you some counter stuff to balance it out, right? If it was a clean algorithm that we could all really understand. The problem is we don't know what's going on there. So you could watch my video, and if the system, in essence, if YouTube or whoever's in charge just wants to completely change your political opinions, they can just send you down a rabbit hole of completely, you know, counter thought to what I'm talking about, let's say. And they might do it the other way as well. So the fact is that simply because we don't know what's under the hood of all of these things, I think it's partly why we need new things. We need more decentralized systems. We need more open sourcing.
And we have the threats of the AI. It's going to be,
a
big problem. Maybe we need to re-establish the Ludits, the Luda, you know, the Luditim. The Ludits, איך אומרים Luditim באנגלית? Ludites? All Australia is full of their ancestors, you know. Yeah. The British, they threw them out to Australia. Okay, we don't have any more time. Our time is gone. So, זהו, נכון? נווה? כן? Because I have more questions about the בחירות בארצות הברית, the election.
Thank you very much, Ariel.
Thank you very much, guys. It's really been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Dave Rubin. Next year, you're going to come and you're going to do it in Hebrew.
Well, how about next year in Jerusalem, and we'll see what happens.